The 5 young Glicks huddled together in the dark corner of their holding cell, their large eyes, adapted for the dim light of their homeworld's dense forests, blinked nervously at every sound from the corridor outside. The metal walls of the slave ship were cold against their blue-gray skin, and the constant humming of engines had become the soundtrack to their nightmares. "They're coming again," whispered Nix, the tallest of the group. Though only 12 cycles old, he had appointed himself protector of the others since their capture 3 months ago. Little Pim, barely 6 cycles, pressed herself closer to Nix's side. Her antenna quivered with fear. "Will they take another one of us today?" Before Nix could answer, the heavy door slid open with a harsh mechanical grind. Light flooded the cell, making the children shield their sensitive eyes. 2 figures stood in the doorway. Captain Drac, the Vorgan slaver who had raided their colony settlement, and beside him, a new alien species none of them had ever seen before. "Humans," Captain Drac announced, his scaled face twisting into what passed for a smile among his kind. "Newest race to join galactic trade. This one wants workers." The human was taller than the Vorgan, but shorter than most spacefaring species. It had no scales, no visible antenna, and only 2 arms instead of the standard 4. Its skin was a light brown color, and tufts of dark hair covered the top of its head. The strangest feature was its eyes. They were forward-facing with white surrounding a brown center, giving the creature an intense stare that made the children shrink back further. "These are the last of the Glicks batch," Drac explained, gesturing carelessly toward the children. "Good workers, strong for their size. Quick learners. The bigger ones can lift half their body weight already." The human stepped forward, moving slowly. The children tensed, expecting the usual rough handling that came with inspection. Most buyers squeezed their arms to test muscle tone or check their teeth like animals at market. But the human just looked at them. It crouched down to their level, making itself smaller rather than looming over them. This behavior confused the Glicks children, who exchanged uncertain glances. "How old?" the human asked in heavily accented trade speech. "The big one is 12 cycles, which is about 15 in your Earth years," Drac answered. "The runt is 6 cycles. The others between 8 and 10. The human's gaze lingered on Pim, who was trying to hide behind Nix. "Why so scared?" the human asked softly. Drac laughed, the sound like gravel in a metal drum. "All slaves are scared. Makes them easier to handle. You'll want the bigger ones for work, I assume. The small female isn't worth much, but I could throw her in as bonus if you take the other 4. At these words, Nix pushed him fully behind him and stretched to his full height, which barely reached the human's chest. "We stay together," he said in broken trade speech. Captain Drac's face darkened. He raised the shock rod at his belt. "Seems this one needs a reminder about speaking out of turn." The human's hand shot out, gripping Drac's arm before the rod could be activated. "No." The single word carried such force that even the battle-hardened slaver paused. "I take all 5, the human said firmly. "All." Drac's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "That will cost." "Double your asking price," the human interrupted, releasing Drac's arm. "Deal now. No bargaining." The slaver's greed quickly overcame his suspicion. "Deal." As Drac turned to process the sale, the human looked back at the children. Something in those strange alien eyes made Nix uncomfortable, but not in the way other buyers had. There was no coldness there, no calculation of profit margins or thoughts of how to work them until they broke. Instead, there was something the young Glicks couldn't name, something he hadn't seen since the day their village was raided and their parents were killed or separated from them. "I am Cal," the human said quietly, just for the children to hear. "You are safe now." None of the Glicks children believed him. They had learned that in this galaxy, safe was just another lie adults told before the pain began. But as they were led from their cell toward an uncertain future, Nix noticed that Cal walked beside them rather than behind, never once reaching for the restraints that hung at his belt. The transfer of ownership happened quickly. Captain Drac counted his payment twice, his clawed fingers moving greedily through the stack of universal credit chips. The 5 Glix children stood in a tight group, their thin bodies trembling slightly under the harsh lights of the docking bay. "Remember," Drac growled to Cal as he pocketed the payment, "obedience training works best with food control. And the shock collars are already programmed, your biometrics." Cal nodded without speaking. His face remained calm, giving away nothing as he accepted the small control device Drac handed him. "Move," Cal said to the children, gesturing toward a medium-sized transport ship docked nearby. The vessel was older but well-maintained, with earth markings along its hull. Nix took Pim's small hand in his, then motioned for the others to follow. 10-year-old twins Zik and Zach walked closely behind them, their identical sets of antennae drooping with fear. Last came 8-year-old Mick, who kept looking back at the slaver ship as if wondering which fate would be worse. They had learned to expect cruelty from new owners. Some previous buyers had seemed kind at first, only to reveal their true nature once away from the sellers. The children moved with the careful slowness of those anticipating pain. Inside Cal's ship, they found themselves in a cargo area that had been converted into a passenger space. Instead of the cages or restraint couches they expected, there were actual seats with safety harnesses. "Sit," Cal instructed, pointing to the seats. "Trip is 3 hours. Must secure for takeoff." The children chose seats close together. Nix made sure Pim was beside him, helping the small girl with her harness before securing his own. None of them spoke. Speaking without permission had always brought punishment from previous handlers. Cal disappeared into the cockpit. They heard the engines power up, felt the slight pressure as the ship lifted off. Through a small viewport, they watched the massive slaver vessel grow smaller as Cal's ship moved away. "What do you think he wants us for?" whispered Zach to his twin. Zik shrugged. "Mining, maybe. Humans need metals like all spacers." "I heard humans eat aliens," Mick said, his voice barely audible. "That's why he bought all of us." Pim began to cry silently, green tears sliding down her blue-gray cheeks. Nix put an arm around her shoulders. "Stop that talk," he hissed at Mick. "We don't know anything yet." The cockpit door slid open, and Cal emerged. The children immediately went silent and stiff. The human carried a container in his hands, which he placed on a fold-down table near the seats. "Food," Cal said, opening the container to reveal what looked like nutrient bars. "Checked composition. Safe for Glix biology." None of the children moved. Food was often used as the first test by new owners. Take it too eagerly, get punished for greed. Refuse it, get punished for disobedience. Cal sighed, then took one of the bars and broke off a small piece. He put it in his own mouth and chewed. "See, not poison." After swallowing, he pushed the container closer to them. "Eat, need strength." Slowly, Nix reached for a bar and broke it into pieces, giving the first piece to Pim. The little girl sniffed it cautiously before taking a tiny nibble. Her eyes widened. "It's sweet," she whispered with surprise. One by one, the others tried the food. It wasn't just safe, it was the first thing they tasted in months that hadn't been bland protein paste. Cal watched them eat without comment. Then he went to a storage locker and returned with blankets, which he handed out. "Rest now," he said. "Long journey ahead." As the human returned to the cockpit, the children exchanged confused glances. "Why give us blankets?" Zik asked. "Slaves don't get blankets." Nix wrapped his blanket around Pim, who was already falling asleep with a half-eaten food bar clutched in her small hand. "Don't trust it," Nix warned. "Remember the Jurgen trader who was nice until we reached his mining moon." But despite his warning, the warm food and soft blankets were working their magic. Soon all 5 children were asleep, their bodies finally relaxing after months of constant tension. In the cockpit, Cal sent an encrypted message to a coordinate far from their current position. Package secured. 5 children, condition poor but stable. No serious injuries. Beginning phase 2. The reply came almost immediately. Understood. Safe house prepared. Freedom path standing by. Cal looked back at the sleeping children through the monitor. For the first time since they'd met him, his face showed emotion, a mixture of anger and resolve. Not slaves, he whispered to himself. Not anymore. The ship landed with a gentle bump on the surface of a small moon. Cal's voice came through the speakers, waking the children from their uneasy sleep. We have arrived. Please stay seated until I complete shutdown. Nix blinked away his drowsiness and immediately checked on the others. Pin was still curled up against him, her small body warm under the blanket. The twins sat alert, their identical faces showing the same worried expression. Mick was pressed against the viewport, trying to see outside. There are trees, Mick reported in a hushed voice, and buildings. Not many. Small ones. Cal emerged from the cockpit and stood before them. Welcome to Haven Moon. This is my home. The children remained silent, waiting for orders. Cal seemed to understand their caution. Come, I show you where you sleep tonight. He pressed a button, and the ship's ramp lowered with a mechanical hum. Fresh air rushed in, real air, not the recycled atmosphere of the slave ship. It carried scents of plants and soil, things the children had almost forgotten during their months in captivity. Cal walked down the ramp first, then turned and waited. He made no move to force or threaten them. After a moment of hesitation, Nix led the others out of the ship. The gravity was slightly less than what they were used to, making their steps feel bouncy. Above them stretched a night sky filled with stars and dominated by an enormous gas giant that took up nearly a quarter of the view. Its swirling clouds glowed with faint blues and greens in the light of a distant sun. Beautiful, whispered Pim, forgetting her fear for a moment as she stared upward. Yes, Cal agreed, following her gaze. Jupiter, too. We orbit it. A path led from the landing pad to a cluster of buildings. The structures were low and rounded, built from a mixture of local stone and manufactured materials. Soft lights glowed from windows, creating a peaceful scene that seemed impossible after the harsh metal walls they'd been confined in for so long. Cal guided them toward the largest building. No one spoke during the short walk. The children stayed close together, their large eyes constantly scanning for threats or signs of what might await them. Inside, they found themselves in a simple but comfortable living space. There was a kitchen area, a table with chairs, and comfortable-looking seating around a central heating unit. Doorways led to other rooms. Hungry? Cal asked, moving toward the kitchen. Before anyone could answer, a door on the far side of the room slid open. The children gasped and huddled together as another figure entered. It was not human. The newcomer was tall and slender with green-tinted skin and 4 arms, a Thrillian, a species known for their medical skills throughout the galaxy. You're back, the Thrillian said to Calendar. These are the children. Cal nodded. This is Jen, doctor and friend. We'll check you for injuries. The Glick's children stared in shock. Thrillians were expensive specialists. Slaves never received care from such high-status medical providers. Jen approached slowly, all 4 hands visible and empty to show she carried no threatening devices. Hello, little ones. I'm here to help. Nick stepped forward, positioning himself between the alien doctor and the other children. Why? He demanded, forgetting for a moment that slaves weren't supposed to ask questions. Why help slaves? Cal and Jen exchanged a look that the children couldn't interpret. You are not slaves here, Cal said firmly. Not anymore. None of the children moved. They had heard lies before. Cal seemed to understand their disbelief. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the control device Drac had given him for their shock collars. With deliberate movements, he placed it on the table, then picked up a heavy cooking tool. The children flinched, expecting violence. Instead, Cal brought the tool down hard on the control device, smashing it into pieces. No collars, he said. No masters. No slaves on Haven Moon. Pym touched the collar around her neck. But they're still on. Jen stepped forward. I can remove them safely. It will not hurt. Why do this? Nix asked again, his voice shaking slightly. What do you want from us? Cal sat down on one of the chairs, making himself smaller and less threatening. I was soldier once. Saw bad things. Slavery is worst thing. Now I use my money to buy freedom. Buy freedom, Zick repeated, confused. There is network, Cal explained. People who help. We find enslaved children, buy them, then help them get home or find new home if old one gone. Our home is gone, Mick said quietly. The raiders destroyed everything. Cal nodded sadly. I know, but your people survive elsewhere. We have contacted them. For the first time since their capture, a tiny flicker of hope appeared in Nix's eyes. Our people are alive. We can go back. Yes, Cal said. But first, rest. Heal. Eat real food. No rush now. You are safe. The word safe still felt like a trap, but as Jen gently removed Pym's collar, revealing unblemished skin beneath, Nix allowed himself to consider that perhaps, just perhaps, this human was telling the truth. Morning came with the soft chimes of an alarm system. The 5 Glix children woke instantly, years of captivity having trained them to respond immediately to any signal. They found themselves in a room with comfortable sleeping mats arranged in a circle, just as they would have slept in their village homes before the raid. Nix was the first to his feet, checking on the others with quick glances. No one had restrained them during the night. The door to their room stood slightly open, neither locked nor guarded. It made no sense. Is this a test? Whispered Zick, voicing what they all wondered. Nix approached the door cautiously and peered out. He could smell something cooking, something that reminded him of home. Come, he said to the others after a moment, but stay together. They moved as a group into the main living area where Cal stood at the cooking unit. He turned as they entered, his face forming what they now recognized as a human smile. Good morning, he said. Sleep well. None of the children answered. They remained clustered together, watching his every move. Cal seemed unbothered by their silence. Breakfast soon. Jen found old Glick's recipes. Try to make food from your world. As if summoned by her name, Jen entered from outside, carrying a container of what looked like purple fruits. The garden is doing well, she announced. These should be ripe enough now. Pym's antennae perked up at the sight of the fruit. Silberries, she whispered with longing. My mother grew those. Jen smiled, her expression gentle. Would you like to help wash them, little one? Pym looked to Nix for permission, a habit formed during their captivity, when making any decision independently could lead to punishment. It's okay, Nix said softly. Go ahead. With hesitant steps, Pym approached Jen and accepted the container of fruit. The Thrillian doctor showed her to a washing station sized perfectly for a child's height. While they prepared the meal together, Cal set the table with actual plates and utensils, not the feeding troughs they'd been given on the slave ships. Why do you do this? Mick suddenly asked. He had been the quietest since their arrival, watching everything with suspicious eyes. Cal paused in his work. Do what? Treat us like people, Mick clarified. We're just Glicks. Everyone says we're only good for work or pets. A shadow passed over Cal's face. Who says this? Everyone, Mick insisted. The raiders, the buyers, the other slaves even. Cal set down the plate he was holding and knelt to Mick's level. They are wrong. All thinking beings deserve freedom and respect. But humans have slaves too, Zack pointed out. We heard stories. Some humans, long ago, Cal nodded. Bad mistake. Great shame. Many died to end it. Now we try to help where we can. Before the conversation could continue, Jen announced that breakfast was ready. The food was familiar, grain porridge with spices, And the sweet silberries on top. It wasn't exactly like home, but close enough that the children ate eagerly. After food, Cal said, "Would you like to see outside? There is garden, small lake nearby." The twins exchanged excited glances. They had always loved water. Can we go outside alone?" Nix asked carefully, testing the boundaries of this strange new situation. Cal nodded. "Yes. Moon is safe. No dangerous animals. Stay within sound of alarm." He showed them a small device. "Press this if need help." After breakfast, the children ventured outside together. The Haven Moon's landscape was different from their homeworld. Less dense vegetation, more open spaces, but the feeling of soil beneath their feet and fresh air on their skin was wonderful after so long in captivity. They walked carefully at first, expecting guards or barriers to appear. When none did, their steps grew bolder. "Do you think it's real?" Zik asked as they reached the edge of a small lake. "The freedom." Nix watched as Pim chased a flying insect similar to those from their home. She was laughing. Actually laughing. For the first time since the raid. "I don't know," he admitted, "but it feels real." Mick picked up a stone and threw it into the water, watching the ripples spread. "They said they contacted our people. Do you believe that part?" Nick sat down on the shoreline, feeling the warmth of the ground seeping into his tired body. "I want to. But why would anyone help slaves they don't know?" "Maybe," Zach said thoughtfully, "not everyone thinks like slavers. Maybe some think like Calendar." As they talked, they noticed another building beyond the trees that they hadn't seen before. A different ship was parked nearby, and figures moved around it. Not humans or Thrillians, but species they didn't recognize. "More aliens," Mick pointed. "Do you think they're slaves too, or buyers?" "Let's find out," Nix decided, his curiosity finally overcoming his caution. Together, they moved toward the mysterious building, still uncertain, but for the first time in months, feeling something like hope. The 5 Glix children approached the distant building cautiously. Years of survival instinct made them stick to the cover of trees and tall grasses as they moved closer. The structure was similar to Cal's home but larger, with several spacecraft parked nearby. "Stay low," Nix whispered to the others. "Watch carefully before we get closer." They crouched behind a cluster of purple-leafed bushes and observed the scene. Several aliens moved around the building and ships. Nix counted at least 4 different species, a pair of tall, furry Morodians with their distinctive 6 limbs, a group of small, hovering Trill with their translucent bodies, a bulky Krax with armored skin, and another human, this one with lighter skin and hair than Calendar. "Are they all slave buyers?" Pim asked, her voice trembling slightly. Zik narrowed his eyes. "Wait, look at that." He pointed to a group of small figures playing in an enclosed area beside the building. They were clearly children of various species. Unlike the Glix children, these young aliens wore colorful clothing and moved freely, chasing each other in what appeared to be a game. "They don't look like slaves," Zach observed. As they watched, one of the playing children, a young Morodian, fell and began to cry. Immediately, the human rushed over, kneeling beside the child and checking for injuries with gentle hands. The interaction looked nothing like how masters treated slaves. "I think we should go back," Mick suggested nervously. "If they see us." "Hello there," a cheerful voice called from behind them. The Glix children spun around in alarm. A short, stocky alien with bright orange skin stood a few paces away. They recognized the species immediately, a Garaxian, known throughout the galaxy as traders and information brokers. "You must be Cal's new rescues," the Garaxian said, smiling to reveal small pearly teeth. "I'm Dax. No need to hide. You're among friends here." None of the children moved or responded. Their experiences had taught them to be wary of friendly words. Dax seemed to understand their hesitation. "Cal calmed ahead to say you might explore today. I've prepared some refreshments if you're interested." He gestured toward the building. "No pressure." You can stay right where you are if you feel safer. Nick stepped forward slightly. What is this place? This is Haven Station, Dax explained. The central hub of our little rescue network. We coordinate missions from here, provide temporary housing for rescued children, and arrange transport to permanent homes. Rescue. Network. Mick repeated. Yes, Dax nodded. There are 15 of us permanent residents, various species who work together to buy children from slavery and help them find new lives. Cal is one of our best field agents. Pym tugged on Nix's arm. Look, she whispered, pointing toward the play area. A new group had emerged from the building. 3 children who were unmistakably Glicks, with the same blue-gray skin and antenna as themselves. They appeared healthy and well cared for, their antenna perked up in expressions of contentment. Other Glicks, Zack gasped. Yes, Dax said gently. Rescued from a processing facility in the Outer Rim about 6 months ago. They're waiting for transport to a Glicks colony on Nirax Prime, where relatives have been located. This information hit the children like a physical blow. They had assumed they were alone, the last survivors of their kind after the devastating raid on their settlement. Our people really are still out there? Nix asked, his voice unsteady. Yes, Dax confirmed. Several Glicks communities survive across 3 systems. We've already sent word that you've been found. They were very happy to hear about you. Pym suddenly darted forward toward the other Glicks children, her natural caution overcome by the longing to be with her own kind. Nix called after her, but she was already halfway to the play area. It's safe, Dax assured them. No one here will harm her, or any of you. The other Glicks children noticed Pym approaching. They stopped their play, antenna quivering with surprise and excitement. One of them, a female about Pym's age, ran to meet her. The remaining 4 watched anxiously as the 2 young Glicks met in the middle of the open space. There was a moment of hesitation. Then the 2 children touched antenna in the traditional Glicks greeting of friendship. Her name is Lynn, Dax informed them. She lost her family too. Mick was the next to break, running toward the group of children with an uncharacteristic display of emotion. The twins followed, unable to resist the pull of seeing others of their kind. Nix remained beside Dax, watching his friends meet the other children. Is it really true? He asked quietly. We're free. No tricks. Dax's expression grew serious. On my honor as a Garaxian, you have my word. For the first time since the raid that had torn their lives apart, Nix felt something hard and cold inside him begin to thaw. As he watched Pym laugh with her new friend, he allowed himself to believe that perhaps this strange human named Cal had indeed done the impossible. He had given them back their future. A week passed on Haven Moon. Each day, the Glicks children grew more comfortable with their newfound freedom. They spent mornings with Cal, learning about Earth culture and history. Afternoons were often spent at Haven Station with the other rescued children, playing games and sharing stories in a mixture of languages. Today was different. Cal had asked them to join him after breakfast for an important talk. The 5 children sat in a half circle on the floor mats in the main room, watching as Cal paced back and forth. You seem worried, Nix observed, surprising himself with his boldness. Just days ago, he would never have commented on a grown-up's mood. Cal stopped pacing and nodded. Yes, hard conversation today. He sat down across from them. Time to tell you everything. Jen joined them, carrying a small device that she placed in the center of their circle. When activated, it projected a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Specific systems glowed brighter than others. This is map of slave trade, Cal explained. Red spots show where children are captured. Blue spots show markets where they are sold. The map was filled with glowing points. There were far more than any of the children had imagined. So many, whispered Zack, his antenna drooping with sadness. Yes, Cal agreed. Too many to save all. This is why I must ask you something important. He touched the device, and the map zoomed in on a system the children recognized immediately, their home. Planet Glicks, Cal continued. Your world was attacked because your people have special ability. Mind sharing, yes. The children exchanged nervous glances. The telepathic connection between Glicks was something they rarely discussed with outsiders. It was a sacred ability, one that allowed their people to share thoughts and emotions when in physical contact. It's private, Nix said defensively. I understand, Hal nodded. But slavers know about it. They sell Glick's children to scientists who want to study this power. Very dangerous. Nick's eyes widened. Is that why the raiders came? For our mind sharing? Yes, Cal confirmed. And they will come again to other Glick settlements unless stopped. Cal pressed another button on the device. The map changed to show a massive ship, far larger than any the children had seen before. This is the main slaver ship, Cal explained. Command center for all raids in this sector. Captain Drax Boss controls it. We have tracked it for months. Now we have chance to stop it. How? Nix asked. Cal looked uncomfortable. We need proof of their plans. Proof that shows which officials are corrupt, which planets will be raided next. Without proof, Galactic Council will not act. What does this have to do with us? Zik asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. The slaver ship will be at neutral trading post in 3 days, Cal said. I can get aboard as buyer looking for more slaves, but I cannot access their secure systems without help. You want to use us as bait, Nix stated flatly. Cal shook his head firmly. No, never. I want to ask for your help, but you can say no. Your choice. What help? Pym asked quietly. Jen spoke for the first time. The slavers' computer systems are heavily protected against electronic hacking, but they've never encountered Glick's mind sharing. With training, you could potentially connect with their systems in a way they cannot detect or block. The room fell silent as the children processed this information. You want us to go back? Mick finally asked, his voice breaking. Back to slavers. Not as slaves, Cal clarified quickly. As partners, I would protect you. Jen and others would be nearby. Full rescue team standing by. But it would be dangerous, Nix pointed out. Yes, Cal admitted. I will not lie to you. There is risk. This is why choice must be yours. The twins whispered together, their antennae touching as they shared private thoughts. Mick stared at the projected image of the slaver ship with a mixture of fear and anger. Pym, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. If we help, could we save other children? Like us? Cal nodded solemnly. Many others. Thousands, maybe. Will you force us if we say no? Nix asked directly, testing Cal's promises of freedom once more. No, Cal answered without hesitation. If you say no, you stay here until Glick's transport arrives next month. You go to new home with your people. No one will blame you. The children looked at each other, their expressions serious beyond their years. They had been through horrors no child should face. Now they were being asked to face their fears again, but this time by choice, not force. We need time to think, Nix finally said. Cal stood up. Of course. Take all day. Talk together. This is big decision. As Cal and Jen left the room to give them privacy, the 5 Glick's children moved closer together, forming a tight circle. One by one, they joined hands, their antennae touching in the center. In the silent communication of their people, they began to share their thoughts, their fears, and ultimately, their decision. Outside, Cal looked up at the gas giant dominating the sky and hoped he had done the right thing by asking children to help fight a war that adults had failed to end. The slaver ship loomed like a dark mountain against the backdrop of stars. From the small observation window of Cal's ship, it looked even more menacing than in the holographic projection. Its hull was scarred from countless battles, a testament to the violence that had built its terrible business. Remember the plan, Cal said quietly to the 5 Glick's children. Stay close to me. Act scared. That won't be hard. Do not make eye contact with anyone but me." The children nodded silently. After a full day of discussion and another 2 days of intense preparation, they had made their choice. They would help Cal infiltrate the slaver network, not because he had asked, but because they couldn't bear the thought of other children suffering as they had. "Docking sequence initiated," announced the ship's computer. "Prepare for arrival." Nix looked at his friends. They wore simple clothes that Cal had provided, deliberately plain to maintain their cover as newly purchased slaves. Hidden beneath Pim's collar was a tiny device that would help them connect to the ship's computer systems. "Everyone ready?" Nix asked. The others touched their antenna to his in response, their people's way of showing solidarity. Cal watched the interaction with respect. "You are the bravest people I have ever known," he told them. "No matter what happens today, remember that." The ship shuddered as it attached to the slaver vessel's docking port. Cal activated his disguise, a small holographic device that altered his appearance just enough to prevent recognition. "Showtime," he muttered. The boarding went smoothly. Cal presented himself as a minor buyer from the Outer Rim, looking to purchase specialized workers for a private research facility. His falsified credentials were accepted without question. The slavers cared only about payment, not purpose. "We have many specimens available," said their guide, a burly four-armed alien with scales that clicked when he walked. "Any particular species you're seeking?" "I'm open to options," Cal replied in a cold, businesslike tone that made the children shiver despite knowing it was an act. "My employer values adaptability." They were led deep into the ship, passing holding cells filled with captives of various species. Many were children. The Glicks fought to keep their expressions neutral despite the horror they felt. "Our command center is just ahead," the guide explained. "The boss likes to meet all new buyers personally." This was exactly what they had hoped for, access to the main computer systems. According to their intelligence, the slaver ship's central database contained everything: raid plans, buyer information, corrupt official contacts, all the evidence they needed. The command center was a large room filled with control panels and viewing screens. Armed guards stood at attention near the doors. At the center sat an enormous alien of a species the children had never seen before, clearly the leader of this terrible operation. "So," the leader rumbled, studying Cal with suspicious eyes, "you seek special merchandise." Cal bowed slightly. "My employer values unique abilities. I heard you might have access to telepathic species." The leader's attention shifted to the 5 Glicks children, who huddled together convincingly. "Ah, more Glicks buyers. Popular lately." He gestured to a nearby console. "We have their entire genetic profile mapped here. Fascinating species." This was their moment. As Cal engaged the leader in negotiation, drawing attention away from the children, Pim slowly separated from the group. She approached the console, appearing to cower near it in fear. Placing her small hand on the access panel, she closed her eyes. The device under her collar activated, linking her mind to the ship's systems through a method no slaver had ever anticipated. The other 4 Glicks formed a protective circle around her, their bodies hiding her actions while their minds joined with hers through their connected antenna. Together, they navigated the complex data systems, searching for the information they needed. "Send it now," Nix whispered, his voice barely audible. In the silent language of their people, Pim acknowledged. Through their combined mental effort, they bypassed security protocols and transmitted the slavers' entire database to the waiting rescue fleet hidden just outside the system. A small light on Cal's wrist device blinked green, the signal that the mission was accomplished. "Actually," Cal said to the slaver leader, straightening his posture, "I think I've seen enough." The leader frowned. "You don't wish to purchase?" "Oh, I'm not here to buy," Cal replied, his voice changing as he deactivated his disguise. "I'm here to shut you down." Confusion turned to alarm on the leader's face as alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The transmission had been detected. "Security breach," shouted one of the operators. "Multiple ships approaching." Cal moved with lightning speed, pulling out a concealed weapon and positioning himself between the children and the guards. "Stay down," he ordered the Glicks. Chaos erupted in the command center. Through the viewing screens, they could see the rescue fleet emerging from hyperspace. A dozen ships bearing the insignia of the Galactic Council's anti-slavery task force. "You've lost," Cal told the leader as armed rescue personnel stormed into the command center. "Your entire operation has been exposed. Every raid plan, every corrupt official, every buyer, all transmitted to the Council." As the slavers were restrained, Jen rushed in with the medical team, immediately gathering the Glick's children. "You did it," she told them, her forearms gently checking them for injuries. "Because of you, thousands of children will be saved." Pym looked up at the viewing screens where the rescue teams were already freeing captives from the holding cells. Among them were children of countless species, all of whom now had a chance for freedom. "We did what was right," Nix said simply. Later, as their ship pulled away from the now captured slaver vessel, Cal sat with the 5 young heroes who had changed the course of history. "Your people will be very proud," he told them. "You have honored the Glick's tradition of courage." Pym leaned against Cal's side, no longer afraid of the human who had once bought them from Captain Drac. "What happens now?" she asked. Cal smiled, resting a gentle hand on her head. "Now you go home, and I continue the work, finding lost children and helping them find their way back to freedom. There's still much to do." "Maybe," Nix suggested, his antenna perked up with new confidence. "When we're older, we can help too." "I would be honored to work with you," Cal replied, meaning every word. As Haven Moon came into view, 5 young Glicks watched with hope in their hearts. They had faced their worst fears and discovered their greatest strength. The future, once stolen from them, now stretched before them with endless possibilities.